Hi, I'm Paul Germain, and welcome to another session of Smart Boating. As you know, if you watched the show before, we cover a variety of topics from man overboard to safety equipment. And the general idea is to give you some information that will help you make smarter decisions and have more fun on the water. But every now and then we take a little side trip, which I think you'll find interesting. That's the case today. And we're going to take a look into the world of outboard racing boats. And joining us is an expert in that area. His name is Steve Norrie of the South Shore Outboard Association. Steve?
Morning, Paul.
Good to see you. Hey, we got a really cool show here today. Can you share a little bit about your boat racing background and a little bit about the association?
Sure. I attended my first boat race in 1955 in Island Falls, Maine. I was 2.5 years old. I tagged along with my dad, and I developed the passion, I think, that day. I've been a member of the American Powerboat Association since 1963, when I started in the junior utility class. So my first race was May of 1963 in Lowell, Massachusetts.
Wow, wow. And how long did you race?
I still once a year manage to get in the boats.
You do? Okay.
Just to keep in touch. My goal is to make it to 2020. That'll give me 7 decades of participating.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about the association. Do you have a lot of members? What's the focus?
Sure. South Shore Outboard originally started off as a club south of Boston. Group of boating enthusiasts got together and raced on weekends. The club grew. I became a member in 1963 with my dad. Today we have 125 members. It's basically a New England racing club.
Okay.
We've maintained the name South Shore Outboard,
right,
but we host races throughout New England during the course of the summer.
Bigger than that, yes. Now, I know you're going to tell us a little bit about boats or some information, but you also got one of the expert association members with us today to help us with that, right?
We have a fellow that's been around longer than me.
Okay.
He's a 2-time member of the Gulf Marine Hall of Champions, Hall of Fame back in the 50s and 60s. Larry Castagnetto from right here in Massachusetts. Larry was a prominent boat builder in the late 50s and early 60s.
Okay.
In addition to a couple of national championships, he had 9 National High Point Championships.
Really?
And his boats were very prominent and were hard to get because he could only build so many.
Okay.
So he's well versed in what we're looking at today.
And he's going to be joining me to go through the boats, right?
He'll be explaining differences in construction from the 50s and 60s right up until today.
All right, beautiful. Well, between the two of you, we certainly got enough knowledge. So why don't we get right into the show?
Okay, thanks, Paul.
Okay. Well, Larry, Steve and I were just talking about this world of outboard racing boats, and it's a really big topic. We can't cover it all in a half-hour show, but I thought we'd put some samples together so people can understand better kind of how it has evolved over the years.
That's correct.
Now, this boat here is a runabout made by Sid Craft?
That's correct.
Yeah. When was it built?
It was built in 1953 in Brunswick, New Jersey.
Okay. What do we got for dimensions here?
Dimensions,
Length, width?
Dimensions overall is 10 feet long. It's about 52 inches wide and probably weighs 130 pounds or so.
About 130 pounds.
But it's it's the smallest of the utilities of those days.
Oh, it is?
It is.
Now, they had different classes, right?
They
A,
did.
B, C, and D. Is
That's
this
correct.
A class?
This is A class.
A class.
That's correct.
And then A class would be defined by certain dimensions, boat dimensions
of the boat,
total weight.
That's correct, and total weight, and also engine size. The engine is significant in that regard.
Okay, all right. And this is our runabout because it's kind of got a pointy bow as opposed to
it's not only a pointy bow, but also in the runabout rules back in those days, you had to have the ability to sit someone in the front of the boat.
Oh, you did?
And that's why when we look at this boat, it's got a seat.
Yes.
The new boats we'll see later on do not have seats.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and these are very popular, I guess, at that time. In the early 50s,
They were. They started basically in the late 40s, early 50s, and then progressed from there.
And was this boat they're looking at, is there any historical significance to it?
This one particularly does. This boat was run by a fellow named Dick O'Day in New Jersey, and he was national champion with this boat, set records with it. And it's wonderful to see this boat still in existence today.
Yes.
Because a lot of the boats of the old days that had the records, are gone. They're memories.
Right.
And this one here has been restored and has a special place in people's hearts.
All right. This is a winning boat right here.
It was a winning boat in its day, and it still is today.
Yeah. Well, Larry, during the 50s, I guess there were 2 or 3 prominent boat manufacturers that used to build boats about the same size?
Yes, there were. You had the Sid Craft, which was your prime motivator.
Yep.
And then we had Speedliner, which was out in the Midwest. And then we had a Revo that was out in New York.
Okay. And did they specialize in different types of racing, or were they all 3 making boats for the same type of race?
Well, basically your Speedliner and your Sid Craft were strictly closed course type boats, which were 3 laps on a mile course.
3 laps, okay.
Revo was basically a marathon boat.
Oh,
they were built heavier and a little different, but they did a really good job at what they did.
Yeah, so they were specialized.
That's correct.
Well, talking about heavier and so on, can you help us understand a little bit about the layout of this? It looks like basically plywood?
Yeah, it's basically plywood. Oh, this is over a mahogany frame.
Okay.
We were building them over spruce frames also, the spruce being a little bit lighter.
Oh.
But the mahogany was what we used back in those 50s and 60s.
So mahogany stringers, if you will, or frames.
That's correct.
And then you have a seating area up here. Was that mandatory in
Yes,
these type of boats?
that was mandatory. Back probably in the early 50s to the mid 50s, we did have to have the seat.
Okay.
Later on, 56, 57, we eliminated the front seat and we closed in the front cockpit.
Oh, you did. Okay. And we've got a steering wheel here. It looks like it's from the period.
Yeah, it definitely is from the period.
And then I remember this in the old days. We had cable steering. So
Yes,
you
that's
wrap
right.
it around the drum, and then you just steer it, and
That's right.
you hope the clamps stay tight back here.
Yeah, there you go. The
that could
rope
be a
doesn't
problem
break.
if
That's right.
The rope doesn't break. Now the driver would kneel right here.
That's correct.
In front of the steering wheel, right?
That's correct.
And they have to have good coordination with the left hand, because this is the throttle we see up on the left-hand side.
Yep, that's a Quincy throttle, which has got a spring on it, which if you release it,
Yeah.
it automatically shuts the motor down.
Yeah. Do they call that a dead man's throttle?
Dead man's throttle, that's
Avoid
correct.
being a dead man.
Yeah.
You let go of the thing, and everything stops. Okay.
That's right.
All right. And this boat was designed for. Was there a horsepower range, or was there a specific outboard
this
for
was specifically for this horsepower range. Your different classes, B, C, and D, had bigger boats than were designed for that increased horsepower, increased speed.
Right. But this was a 7.5.
This is a 7.5 horse Class A motor, right?
Okay. Well, Larry, here we have a 7.5 Mercury horsepower.
That's correct.
And outboard. This is a KG4?
KG4, that's correct.
This is very popular in the Class A racing back in the 50s,
That's
right?
correct. That was the only engine.
Oh, that was the only engine?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. If we started at the top and kind of pointed out some of the features here, it looks like the first thing we got a gas tank here,
That's correct.
which, I don't know, is a gallon or something?
It
like
probably
that?
holds approximately a gallon. It's enough for 2 complete heats.
2 complete heats, which is, each heat is 3 times around.
That's correct.
3/4 mile course, right?
That's correct.
Right. Got a recoil starter on
Yep.
here. That's
Inside.
nice. You
That's
pull it
right.
out, it goes back in. All right. What else we got here? A little carburetor, right?
Yep, you have a carburetor. Normally, we'll have a shield over that carburetor when we're racing, just
you
so
would.
if you picked up water from another boat,
Yes.
it doesn't stop the
Around
engine.
the engine.
Right.
Okay. All right. We got
That's a
throttle cable here.
right? Yep,
Yep. This is a 2-cylinder, 2-stroke.
that's correct.
Right?
Yep.
And then how about as we move down the leg here, it looks like we've got a very streamlined gear case.
Yes, it
is
is.
there something different about that?
Well, the thing is that your standard gear cases in these things for the outboard, for the regular outboards, were basically very clumsy. And what they wanted to do is to streamline the lower units so
Yes.
you could get the most speed out of these things as you could.
Right. So this is a streamlined gear case.
That's correct.
And was there a ratio in it, or was it 1-to-1?
This is a 1-to-1 gear ratio.
So if this thing was winding up at say 5,500 or 6,000, the prop would be turning that fast.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Wow. What, as a result of all that activity, what sort of speed would they get out of a boat engine combination?
Well,
like
this boat here ran probably around 45 miles an hour.
Really?
Yep, and that's with a very small horsepower motor and high RPMs, and that'll do it.
That's really moving along.
It is. It absolutely is.
So Larry, we were just talking about an early runabout, 1950s
That's correct.
runabout.
Right.
And this is a different style made by the same manufacturer, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Sid Craft.
Can you tell me a little bit about it?
Yep, this boat here was probably built around 1957. It was a boat that was the first of its kind by Sid Craft.
Really?
Because Sid Craft never built hydroplanes before. And they were very successful in these boats, and they became the class act, you might say, for a good number of years. There were other people who were making hydroplanes, but Sid came in with this particular design, and it worked very, very well.
Very well. Now this is what they call a three-point hydroplane as opposed to a runabout. Can you help explain what that means?
Yeah, basically you have two sponsons in the front of the boat.
Right, up here.
Yeah, one on each side.
Yeah.
And the third point really is the planing surface at the back of the boat.
Okay.
But when this boat gets running at speed, and this boat speed-wise would probably go in the upper 50s in that category, mid to upper 50s.
It's a slightly larger motor than the other one,
Yep,
right?
the other was the other. It was an A class. This is a B class.
This is a B class,
and this is a 20 cubic inch motor. And the thing is, the boats run on the hydroplanes. They tend to run faster anyway, and the sponsons at speed actually get off the water.
Right, because they're trapping the air that comes underneath the hull and it's lifting it up, right?
That's absolutely correct.
So this is a fast, light boat.
It is. It is quite a bit lighter than in the utilities in its particular class, and they're quite a bit faster.
Well, Larry, on these Class B hydros that were used in the 50s, what were the requirements? Were there length requirements, beam requirements, weight requirements?
The only requirement they had on the hydros in those days was an overall weight requirement.
Overall weight, which would be the engine, the driver, and the boat itself.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about the unique design. If we look at construction moving from the bow to the stern, this where it says 76.P.
That's correct.
This foredeck, if you will, it looks like it has stringers and then some sort of fabric stretched over it.
Yeah, it's a double grade aircraft fabric that basically used on airplanes, really.
So they put the frame down and then they stretch that fabric over.
That's correct.
And then they impregnate it with something.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, we used to call it dope, but it tightens the fabric up the more you put it on there, and it gets to a certain point, and it's nice and tight.
All right, so that's a nice, light, strong
it is, very
way
light.
to do construction.
That's correct.
How about as we move back into the boats, were these boats screwed together, bolted together, nailed together?
Well, basically the construction was similar to the one that we saw in the utility, in as much as that the frames are screwed together, the string is to the frames, but the plywood is all basically nailed onto the boat.
It's nailed.
And basically it's a threaded nail.
And do we have a similar foundation in terms of mahogany frames and then a plywood on top of that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
The framing is the same.
Yeah, and then they beef up the transom, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, they will. It's tied into the cockpit sides, and again, the transom is very rigid. That won't go anywhere.
Right. And this is a Sid Craft again, similar, same manufacturer that we looked at the runabout earlier, right?
That's correct.
Yep.
That's
so
correct.
they made a lot of different boats, I guess.
They did. They did. But they were strictly racing boats.
Strictly racing boats. And again, similar to what we've seen earlier, the driver would sit here, Neil here, right?
Neil here, right.
Have the steering wheel with the right hand, cable steering, throttle on the left.
That's correct.
And a larger motor on this one.
This particular is a B-class motor, a 20 cubic inch motor.
20 cubic inch, and that was roughly 20 horsepower?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay.
That's right.
And Larry, through much of the 50s, a lot of these Class B hydros used the Mercury 20H, which we've got here, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, and H was for a Hurricane, which meant it was part of the racing series,
that's
right?
That's correct, exactly right.
Yeah. So this was, what, a larger displacement and stroke than the other one we looked at earlier?
The thing is, the one we looked at earlier was a KG4H.
Yes.
And that one here had 15 cubic inches.
Okay.
This one here has 20 cubic inches, which is the Class B.
Wow, they got quite a, well, they went from 7.5 to roughly 20 horsepower.
That's
without
correct.
much increase in the displacement,
inches,
really.
Right, exactly.
Isn't that interesting? Okay. What are some of the other features on this? It's similar to the other one. It has a small carburetor at the front.
That's right. That's correct. But you'll notice this one does not have a gas tank mounted on it.
Oh, good point.
And the thing is that the gas tank is located in the boat, and it's pressurized from the engine. It forces the fuel into the engine to the carburetor directly.
Yeah, how'd that work out?
It worked out well.
Oh, it did?
The thing is that initially they had a two-hose system with air pressure, but the air pressure was unreliable.
Okay.
It had tank problems, and when they did convert it, they converted to a regular fuel pump and directly.
I see a fuel pump over here.
Fuel
so
pump over there, and that was part of the conversion.
Right. And this, again, two-cycle, two-cylinder, a short shaft.
Correct.
Down to a small streamlined casing there.
That's right.
Which, again, was a direct ratio. So if the motor was turned 6, the prop was turning 6, right?
1-to-1 gear ratio,
That was the theory anyways,
right? That's right, exactly, right. That's right, that's right.
Well, Mercury was certainly a big force back in the 50s.
Definitely was.
With the outboard motors and the racing and all that. And you've got one here. This is slightly larger than the one we saw earlier. This is a KG7, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. What's the difference here?
Well, basically the difference is a few more cubic inches in this 7 versus the 4.
Okay.
This is a 20 cubic inch where the other was 15 cubic inches.
Okay.
And it develops a few more horsepower.
It does. Now, if I wanted to go racing and I want this size motor, would they sell me a different engine, or would they sell me essentially the same engines that I'd get for my fishing boat?
Basically, the power head is exactly the same on these engines as it was on the fishing engines. The only difference is the lower units are different.
It is. Okay, we can see on this one it's got
That's
the
right.
Streamlined lower unit. All these racing motors do.
They do.
How about this one here? This one is a little more specialized for racing,
Yeah,
is
this
it?
one here they built in 1954, and this is a Mark 20H. And this one here was built and designed strictly for racing. The power head wouldn't be interchangeable with your standard motors.
Okay, all right. And I see this is a magneto or a timing adjustment here on this side?
Exactly right, exactly right.
Did you adjust them when you're racing, or did you pretty much put them in one place and leave them fixed?
Well, initially we adjusted them, but then turned out that we could leave them in a fixed position and get them started fine. So
All right.
we timed them and left them alone.
Put the throttle in the corner and go.
Go, that's
All right.
right.
Now we've got 2 Mercuries here.
That's
Now this
right.
one, this blue one here, this is a Champion.
Yeah.
Now, what's the story on this? It's a 2-cycle, 2-cylinder again.
Exactly right, and it's the same 20 cubic inches as these motors here.
Oh, it is. Okay.
But the internals of this engine is a lot different.
Oh, it is.
It has got a central rotary valve. These had reed valves in them. But,
oh boy. Okay.
But the thing is, they were a lot lighter weight.
They were.
This thing only weighed something like 47 pounds.
Oh.
Where these weigh probably closer to 65.
Is that right? Wow.
And it's got a different gear ratio in the lower unit also. It's got a 16:21, where these were 1-to-1s the whole way down.
Okay.
And they were lightweight, they were very powerful, and they were very, very competitive with Mercury.
Were they? Okay. All right. So this is one of Mercury's probably first big competitors in that era, right?
It absolutely was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. That's an interesting design.
It is.
Well, Larry, we've got another Mercury here, and
right.
this one was, I guess, with a 20H, basically,
Yep,
right?
20H, the same as we looked at earlier.
Yeah. What's different about this one?
This one here is what we call a conversion. Back when the Champion hot rod came along and it was making Mercury look a little bit bad, Mercury decided it needed a little boost. And it got Quincy Welding down in Quincy, Illinois to design an exhaust system, a new carburetor, a fuel pump, in a gear ratio in the lower unit, which picked up about 5 or 6 miles per hour over the unconverted version.
Wow.
And it made Champion look very bad.
Really? That's like night and day, 5 or 6 miles an hour when you're racing, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And was a lot of it due to this tuned exhaust?
Yeah,
this different exhaust
most of it was the tuned exhaust.
They run a little loud?
Look very loud. I mean, it caused problems at some of our race sites, and we had difficulty finding a place to test these things.
All right. So higher performance, but a little tough on the neighbors.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
All right. Well, we've got another Mercury here behind you here.
Yep, that's correct.
Why don't you come over here?
All right.
We can see some of the aspects of it. What are some of the things you want to point out on this one?
This one here is this is a Class C motor, which is 30 cubic inch. We talked initially 15 cubic inch, 20 cubic inch. This is 30 cubic inches.
30 cubic inch.
And this is 4-cylinder.
Yep.
It's got a magneto for an ignition system, and it has 2 carburetors versus we had 1 carburetor on the 2 cylinders.
Yes.
And again, it's a 1-to-1 gear ratio in the lower unit, and it's set up much the same way. But this motor here was basically built as a racing motor also.
It was.
Yeah.
And what years did they produce this?
This is 1956 to maybe 58, somewhere in that category.
Okay. All right. Did pretty well, did it?
It did well. It was the only motor in its class, just the same as until Champion came along. You know, Mercury was the only motor, and Mercury has basically taken over, all the racing motors during those years.
Wow, they made a good motor.
They made a good motor, and they were a nice stock configuration, so people could afford them.
Well, Larry, we're looking at different configurations in different years of these race boats to kind of show people what the differences were. Now that we're back to a runabout here, slightly more modern, built maybe 2014, 2015. What are some of the key differences between a runabout? I know this is a different class.
That's
correct. A C class as opposed to an A class, but for a runabout configuration or a race boat configuration, what are some of the differences you noticed over the years?
Well, basically, they've made a lot more aerodynamic and streamlined.
Okay.
In addition, they've also changed the configuration as far as structural, but the biggest thing is the aerodynamics of them.
It is. Okay, so the boat we started before was basically open in the front, and then it has the steering station in the middle, and then we went to the stern. And this one, in place of that, it's all closed off.
That's right.
And we got an aerodynamic windshield.
That's
here,
correct.
Right?
That's
Is that
right.
kind of what you were talking about to a certain
right.
extent?
That's right.
Yep, yep. And how about the dimensions on this? Again, it's a different class, a C class,
Right.
but were these a little more narrow on the beam than the older boats?
Well, they are quite a bit narrow in the beam. Again, it gets back to the aerodynamics. You're pushing a lot less air in these boats than you were in the old boats.
Okay, all right. But still a runabout, which is like a kind of quote-unquote V-type configuration,
That's
a
correct.
traditional boat configuration.
Right, right.
Yep. And so this would be a little faster. How about when a driver was driving this? Did they use any different techniques? In other words, in the old boats, they seem to move their weight around consciously to balance the boat.
That's
Is that
correct.
true of these boats, or is that a little different on the newer
It's
ones?
a little bit different on the newer ones. You can see the cockpits are so much narrower.
Yes.
You can't move around in the cockpit. You go forward and back, but you don't move to one side to get around a corner.
Okay.
They're
all right.
they're a lot safer. They really are.
Are they?
I can't
Okay.
believe how. I don't know. Looking at them, how easy they are to drive compared to the old fat boats.
Yeah, that's nice, huh?
That's nice.
Larry, over the years, construction and manufacturing of these race boats has changed, has evolved, if you will. Now this one is very shiny, for lack of a better way of
Right.
putting it, and it's a plywood skin over what, spruce
It's
frames?
spruce framing. That's correct.
Yeah. And how thick is the plywood? Is it different thicknesses for the deck and the hull and the bottom?
Yeah, the deck is probably 1/8 inch. The sides could either be 1/8 or 1/4. The bottom is could be as much as 3/8.
Okay, all right. And then we get the spruce
Spruce framing.
stringers in there,
That's
frames
correct.
in there.
Right,
Yep.
right.
Yep. And is this as a result of the newer manufacturing techniques? Does this tend to be a lighter boat than in the previous
Yeah,
years?
considerably lighter boat. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How much lighter do you think it is?
It's 40, 50 pounds lighter.
40, 50
Yeah,
pounds. Okay.
that's right.
All right. And this was, I know different treatments like West System are popular with recreational boaters. Have they been able to take advantage of that in the race boats as well?
Absolutely. I mean, it's got tremendous amount of strength built right into it without worrying about fastenings.
Okay.
The
all
glue
right.
does the work.
It does. Okay. All right. So you can get by with less fastenings and less heavy-duty fastenings because the glue is picking up a bunch of the load.
Absolutely.
And at the same time, you've got a end result shell or boat that's probably as strong or stronger than they were.
Definitely stronger.
Definitely
stronger.
Yeah. So it's lighter and stronger.
That's right.
Yeah.
They're great. It's amazing how technology has gotten itself into the wood business.
Right. Well, Larry, in recent racing years, I know a lot of the racers in some of the larger class, like
Right.
the C class perhaps, are using these Japanese motors.
That's correct.
Yamato.
Well, right, a moto.
And a couple of differences I noticed right away. One is that in contrast to some of the other engines that have a recoil start, these you actually wind a rope around and you pull.
That's correct.
Right?
Yep.
And you got a gas tank over
That's
here,
correct.
which is different too,
That's right. With gravity feed, no fuel pump.
Right. Because this was a replacement or something was used instead sometimes of the Mercury Mark 30, right?
That's correct.
Right.
That's correct.
So there are some differences there.
Yep.
So no recoil, got the gas tank here, fixed magneto, right?
Yep,
So they didn't
exactly
change
right.
the timing,
Nope,
right?
Nope. It's electronic ignition also, which there's no maintenance to in comparison to the Mercuries that had points and condensers to adjust and maintain on a regular basis.
And and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that they have an active sport over there in Japan,
They do.
and the Japanese manufacturer leases the motors to the racers for a certain period of time, or they have historically.
That's correct.
And then they take them back to recondition them, and then they send them throughout the world for this type of racing.
That's
right?
correct.
Yeah.
These motors were built specifically for racing
They were
in Japan.
Yep. So we've got a single carburetor here. We have a fuel pump on here, I guess.
No
fuel
It's
pump.
gravity fuel.
Oh, gravity
with a tank
fed.
on
Right,
top.
right.
That's right. This is
Okay.
a 2-cylinder compared to the 4-cylinder Mercuries.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And they're 24 cubic inch versus the 30 cubic inch. But they're a racing engine. They were designed and they do a good job.
These are basically bulletproof, aren't they?
They absolutely are.
Yep.
They absolutely are.
Well, Larry, this is an interesting example of a race boat. This is another hydro. This is what they call a pickle fork.
That's
right?
correct, because of the 2 pickles in the front of it.
The two extensions.
That's right.
Now, my understanding is this was connected in a certain way to Sid Craft, and
Yeah,
in
it
terms of
was.
lineage, if you will.
The thing is, Shannon Bowman worked for Sid back in the days when Sid was building them. And a few years later, when actually Sid stopped building boats and Shannon started picking them up.
Oh yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So he started making them. So this boat was built around the 2000s, and I guess this had a pretty good track record.
Oh, it
didn't
had a very good track record. This won the Wallman Award back a number of years ago, and it's a high point in its class. Well,
Really?
actually, high point of all classes
Really?
in the American Powerboat Association.
Yeah, and that's a reflection of the boat and the driver.
And the
right?
driver. You can't win it without the driver.
Right. Well, Larry, this is a fairly modern, from a construction standpoint,
That's correct.
boat design, right? And this, similar to some of the other modern boats, would use what, a light grade plywood and then staples?
Yep. Yeah. Basically, you got an 1/8 inch plywood over the deck and a lot of the side parts, and again stapled and high performance glue to hold them together.
Yeah, very stiff. Now, it's interesting that you can't see it so well at the camera, but this side is actually higher than this side.
That's correct.
What's the story there?
Well, basically, when you're driving these boats, you're driving them on a left-hand cornered course. And what you do is when you come into a corner, you put your weight against the outside.
Okay.
And then you hook your elbow on the left side.
So you got to beef that up because you're leaning into that.
Yep, you got centrifugal force trying to drive you out of the cockpit, and that higher cockpit on the right-hand side keeps you in the boat better.
Okay, and we've got another piece that people can't see because it's here on the left side.
Right.
These are left-hand courses, these boats
That's
going
correct.
around, right?
That's all we run, right?
And how does this fin fits into the whole
And basically
picture?
what this boat will do is it'll turn literally on the fin.
Just on the fin?
Yeah, the sponsons will be riding off the water, and that fin will be sticking down, and when you turn the motor and that boat comes around, it's going to almost pivot on the fin.
Okay, so this is a critical piece of the whole construction.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Well, Larry, we've got the cowl off of another Mercury outboard.
That's right.
44 cubic inch, if I understand it correctly.
That's
Four
correct.
cylinder,
That's
two-stroke.
right. Yep.
Two-stroke.
This is a D class motor.
A D class. So that's the
correct.
top class.
That's
A, B,
correct.
C, D.
That's right.
And what are some of the other things we got in here? We got a couple carburetors.
Yeah, we have 2 carburetors. We get a fuel pump. We got a solid state ignition.
Yep. Recoil. We got a recoil starter
recoil
here.
start on that, right.
Yep.
The lower unit aspect of it is a little bit interesting because Mercury made a special lower unit for it.
They did.
They did. Just for, and basically it just, again, keeps your lower center of gravity on this thing. It's only a 12-inch transom height.
Okay.
So again, you're keeping your lower center of gravity.
So in contrast to a regular short shaft, it's even shorter.
Absolutely.
Right.
About 2 inches shorter.
Which decreases your drag, gives you more speed, right?
That's correct.
Now
That's
these
correct.
are very popular for quite a long time,
They
right?
were.
Still used today.
They are.
Yeah.
They can be.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
So a good basic motor design, electronic ignition.
Yep.
These wind up maybe a little tighter than some of their early
Yeah,
motors,
they
you think?
do. These usually run around 7,000 RPM.
7,000 RPM.
Yeah. And
do
then
they,
this thing will go 80 miles an hour. This boat.
is that right?
Oh, it'll move.
That's flying.
Literally.
Well, Steve, it's hard to believe that we're getting close to the end of the show. We've had the opportunity to work with really a true expert in the air of these boats. One of your members, Larry, was very helpful as we went through the different engines and the boat configurations. That was a super thing. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up the show today?
Well, I'd like to thank you for coming out and shooting this. Great opportunity for us. If any of the viewers would like to find out more about this sport, it's a wonderful sport if you like the water, if you're competitive. It's very family oriented. You can visit our website, southshoreoutboard.com. Our race schedule is listed there and how you can learn more about us. And if you're out in the Lakes region this summer, we will have several of these boats on display at the New Hampshire Boat Museum for the summer season.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
And thank you, Smart Boating viewers, for joining us. If you have comments or questions, visit us on our website, www.smartboatingus.com. Thank you.